I thought family meant unconditional love. The kind of love that wraps around you like a blanket on cold nights, steady and unquestioning. The kind that waits by the door no matter how far you roam or how long you've been gone. But I've learned something quietly and painfully over the years. In my family, love had conditions. Conditions I could never quite meet. The text came through on a Tuesday morning. I was in the kitchen, barefoot, coffee in hand, the radio murmuring soft jazz behind me. I wasn't expecting anything dramatic. Just maybe an update from my sister or a grocery reminder from Mom. But when I looked down at my phone, the world inside me shifted. Just a few words, stripped of context, stripped of compassion. Don't come to your mother's birthday. Your sister's boyfriend is important, and we don't want any embarrassment. That was it. No greeting. No explanation. Not even a name at the end. But it didn't matter. I knew the tone. I knew the way it had been crafted like a surgeon's blade, precise, clean, and devastating. The words burned hotter than they should have. Maybe because I was still naive enough to hope they'd want me there. Maybe because I'd convinced myself this year might be different. Maybe because, in some twisted part of my heart, I still wanted their approval. But above all else, it hurt because it confirmed something I'd felt my entire life, but had never seen written out in plain text. I was the family embarrassment. I sat down at the kitchen table, my hands trembling slightly, the coffee rippling in its mug like my body had absorbed a tremor no one else could see. I read the message again. I even laughed, a sharp, dry sound that made the silence in the room feel louder. They were really doing it this time. Not just forgetting to include me in the group text. Not just leaving me out of the photo. This time, they said it out loud. I wasn't welcome. And it wasn't just anyone saying it. It was my father. The man who once told me that strength meant standing tall, even when no one clapped for you. The man who taught me to tie my shoes, to stand up for myself, and to tell the truth no matter what it cost. But apparently, truth was only noble if it didn't make the family uncomfortable. I stared out the window, eyes blurring against the late morning light, and for a moment I felt like I was watching my own life through glass. Separate. Removed. Like I was the ghost of a daughter they never really wanted, just drifting around the edges of their lives, too complicated to invite, and too resilient to fully erase. And then, of course, came the flood. The memories, the comparisons, the years of swallowing back hurt with a polite smile. Ava, my younger sister. Ava, with her perfect bone structure and her even more perfect timing. Ava, who was always praised for being so mature for her age, even when she was lying through her teeth. The darling of the family. The safe one. The beautiful one. The one who followed the rules and never made anyone uncomfortable by wanting things. Ava could do no wrong, even when she did everything wrong. She was always the one they rallied around. I was the one they tolerated. She brought home a new boyfriend last month. Ethan. Tall, square-jawed, confident in that performative LinkedIn kind of way. A real catch, my mother had whispered on the phone, her voice bright and expectant, like Ava had won a prize and the whole family got to share the trophy. And now, suddenly, he was important. So important that my presence might tarnish their freshly polished illusion. I knew what they were afraid of. They were afraid I'd talk about my work. That I'd mention the documentary I just finished and expose on private detention centers. That I'd tell Ethan I make art that disturbs people, art that exposes injustice. That I'd show up in my thrifted leather boots instead of heels, wearing stories etched into my skin that they didn't want guests to see. They were afraid I'd ruin the fantasy. Because I didn't chase a stable job in marketing. I didn't marry young or have babies or buy a 3-bedroom home with a husband in finance. I didn't build the kind of life that made my parents feel safe at dinner parties. I built one that made them squirm. I built one that made me proud. But pride doesn't protect you from loneliness. I tried calling my mom. I knew better, but I tried anyway. I watched the call ring and ring and ring. No answer. No voicemail. Nothing but silence on the other end of the line. It was the kind of silence that says more than words ever could. Not now. Not today. Not when it's easier to pretend you don't exist. I left a message anyway. Hey, I just got Dad's text. I wasn't sure if you knew. I wanted to talk. Just call me back when you can. She never did. That night, I curled into my couch with a blanket and stared at the ceiling for what felt like hours. I wasn't crying. I didn't feel sad. Not exactly. It was something colder than that. Something emptier. I felt like a void had opened up in the middle of me, and I couldn't tell if it had been forming slowly over the years, or if it had appeared all at once, born from a single, careless sentence on a screen. My phone buzzed again just before midnight. It was Ava. I heard you're not coming. Probably for the best. Ethan's meeting everyone, and I don't want drama. Hope you're good though, XX. That XX at the end, that fake warmth like wrapping barbed wire in lace, was more brutal than the message itself. It was Ava's way. Keep the tone light. Keep the confrontation low. Keep the judgment just vague enough to pass as concern. I didn't reply. I closed the message and turned off my phone. That was the night I stopped hoping for a seat at their table. Not because I didn't deserve one, but because I finally understood some tables aren't built to hold everyone. Some tables are constructed with invisible rules and unspoken hierarchies, polished with pretense and preference, where only those who fit a certain mold are invited to stay. And if you don't fit, you're asked to leave quietly, before dessert. They say time softens things, that once the sting fades, you start to see things differently. But there are nights when time doesn't soften anything. It only sharpens the silence. And tonight was one of those nights. It was my mother's birthday. The birthday I was explicitly told not to attend. The night I was instructed, by a text from my own father, to stay away to avoid embarrassment. I hadn't replied. I hadn't pleaded. I hadn't even asked for clarity, because in families like mine, clarity comes at a price. And I was done paying it. So instead, I buried myself in something I could control. My work. It was 7:03 p.m. when the conference began. The glow of my laptop bathed my apartment in pale blue light, my hair pulled back, lips glossed, every inch of me carefully composed to match the weight of the moment. I sat in my home office, which overlooked the city's skyline, glass towers in the distance catching the last blush of sunset, while the rest of the world below dissolved into evening. Tonight's meeting wasn't just another touch base or internal check-in. This was the culmination of 6 months of strategy, design, negotiation, and nearly sleepless nights. Our agency, my agency, was on the verge of signing a partnership with one of the largest tech platforms in the world. If it went through, it wouldn't just elevate the company I had built from nothing into a global name. It would silence every person who had ever looked at me like I was some lost creative girl with too many opinions and not enough boundaries. As the video windows began filling in, board members, legal advisors, the CTO of our prospective partner, I offered each one a small nod. My voice was calm, steady, and laced with that practiced ease I had earned through years of fighting for my place at tables I was never invited to. Thank you, everyone, for joining tonight. I know it's late, and I appreciate your time, I said, the sound of my own voice grounding me, reminding me who I was and who I'd become. We're here to finalize the integration points, address your legal concerns, and ensure our launch calendar is realistic and mutually beneficial. Halfway through the meeting, while I was discussing the scalability of our creative modules, my phone buzzed. Once, then again. I glanced down, expecting maybe an update from my assistant or a reminder ping. But it wasn't a calendar alert. It was my mother. Incoming call, Mom. My fingers froze above the keyboard. My throat tightened in that strange, involuntary way, the body's muscle memory of bracing for impact. I stared at the name flashing on the screen as if it were a trick of the light. She hadn't called when I texted her. She hadn't answered when I reached out, confused and hurt, and still naive enough to want a private moment with her. But now on her birthday, on the exact evening I'd been told not to come, she was calling. I muted the video conference quickly, pretending I was reading something important off-screen. I answered. "Hi," I said softly, not entirely sure what tone I was allowed to use anymore. There was no greeting on the other end, just a sigh so sharp it cut straight through the line. "I cannot believe you made this into a thing," she said. Her voice was sharp, breathy, the kind of exasperation that's rehearsed to sound casual but lands like a slap. "Why couldn't you just quietly skip the dinner? Must you always make everything dramatic?" I blinked, mouth open, stunned by the sheer absurdity of her words. "What are you talking about?" I whispered, careful not to let my rage leak through, but not soft enough to let it slide. "You could have told Ava you weren't coming instead of whatever that was," she continued, like she was reading from a script written by someone who didn't remember who they were talking to. "I didn't say anything to Ava," I snapped, louder than I meant. "I didn't tell anyone anything because I was told not to come. You didn't return my call. You didn't even answer." My voice cracked at the edges, not from weakness, but from a storm that had been building for years and was now roaring just beneath my ribs. "I just didn't want a scene," she said quietly, and those 6 words made my skin crawl. She didn't want a scene. I wanted to laugh. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw my phone across the room and watch it shatter the same way their illusion of family had shattered for me long ago. But instead, I said nothing. She sighed again. "You know how important tonight is for Ava. Ethan's meeting the whole family, and she's finally settled down with someone stable. Can't you just be happy for her?" That was when I lost it. "Do you even hear yourself?" I asked, my voice low but trembling. "Do you know what it's like to be erased, to be treated like a problem to manage instead of a daughter to love? I've spent my entire adult life building something out of nothing while Ava coasted from one safety net to another, and you all applauded her for breathing." Silence. A tight inhale on the other end. "I'm sorry you feel that way," she said coldly, the universal phrase for "I'm not sorry at all." Before I could say more, a sharp double beep interrupted us. "Incoming video call, Ava." I was still holding my phone, still trying to process the sheer audacity of my mother's guilt-tripping monologue, when Ava's face suddenly filled the screen, bright-lit, smug, bathed in the warm, golden glow of the birthday dinner I wasn't invited to. "Oh my God, you picked up," Ava chirped, completely oblivious, or maybe perfectly aware, of how inappropriate her timing was. "We'd just finished the toast. Mom was telling everyone you were probably busy with work. Anyway, look who I just have to show you." She spun her phone around with the kind of theatrical flair only Ava could manage, her earrings catching the light, her laughter a little too loud to be accidental. And then I saw him. The boyfriend. The one who had supposedly earned my replacement at the table. The one they were all fawning over like he'd walked on water instead of just walking through the front door. Except the second his face appeared on the screen, his jaw slackened, his expression went pale, and his confident posture vanished like fog in sunlight. He blinked. Hard. Twice. And then he stammered. "Wait. Hello?" I didn't know, his voice cracked. "I mean, hello, boss." Ava froze. I didn't. I leaned slightly closer to the screen, letting the weight of recognition hit him fully. "Nice to see you again, Ethan," I said, my voice velvet wrapped around steel. The room behind him fell into an eerie hush. Somewhere off camera, someone dropped a fork. Maybe it was Mom. Maybe it was Dad. I imagined them all watching this moment unfold, like a slow-motion car crash they couldn't peel their eyes away from. Ava was still holding the phone, her mouth slightly open, her brows furrowed in confusion. "Wait, boss? What are you talking about?" Ethan swallowed visibly. He looked like he wanted to disappear. "I didn't know she was your sister," he said, now speaking directly to Ava. panic rising in his voice. She owns the agency I just signed a partnership with. She's the one who negotiated the entire deal. Silence. Pure. Absolute. And delicious. I let the weight of the moment hang in the air like thunder. It was Ava who finally broke it. You said you worked with a creative team, she said slowly, the pieces clearly not clicking fast enough. Ethan looked mortified. I didn't lie. I didn't realize, God, I didn't know. I thought her last name sounded familiar, but she never. She didn't need to, I interrupted, letting every word drop like a stone in still water. I don't lead with family connections. I lead with results. Ava was staring at the screen now like she'd just opened a gift and found a snake inside. You mean, he works for you? He works with me, I corrected. But yes, I'm his boss. And I'm also the woman who wasn't invited to dinner because you thought I might embarrass you. I waited, watched, felt every inch of my spine go steel. And then, with a breath, I added, now that we've cleared that up, I have a meeting to return to. Enjoy the leftovers. I ended the call. Back in my office, the laptop screen was still lit. My team was mid-discussion, oblivious to the drama that had just unfolded in the palm of my hand. I unmuted myself, sat a little taller, and smiled like I'd never felt more alive. Apologies for the delay, I said smoothly. Let's finalize this. There is a very particular kind of silence that follows the unmasking of a carefully maintained lie, a silence that doesn't simply fall over a room, but shatters into it, like glass collapsing under its own weight. That was the silence I imagined filling my family's dining room after I ended the video call with Ava and Ethan. A silence not born from grief or confusion, but from the sharp, unbearable clarity that comes when people suddenly realize that the person they underestimated has power, and worse, the grace to wield it quietly. Back in my office, I stared at the muted video conference still unfolding in soft voices and shifting documents, the tone purely business, untouched by the storm that had just passed through my personal life like a controlled detonation. I listened for a moment to my lead strategist outlining our next quarter's timeline and nodded, letting the warmth of focus wash over me like a balm. There was something so steadying about competence, mine. There's all of it. It reminded me that no matter how messy my roots might be, I had grown into something solid, sharp, and irrefutably mine. 15 minutes later, we closed the deal. The final signatures were exchanged digitally, and with a few tight smiles and polite congratulations, the meeting ended. My laptop screen dimmed to black, casting a mirror-like reflection of my own face back at me. I looked calm. I looked composed. But behind my eyes was something colder, an ache I didn't yet know how to name. Not 2 minutes after I shut my laptop, my phone began buzzing again. Incoming call. Dad. Then another, overlapping it. Incoming call, Mom. And then Ava. I didn't answer. I watched the names flash, fade, and return again like clockwork. My phone became a stage of desperate performances, actors scrambling to rewrite a script they'd performed flawlessly for years, now suddenly aware the audience had changed. Eventually, curiosity overrode my resolve. I didn't want to hear what they had to say, not out of forgiveness or interest, but out of the same reason you read the final paragraph of a tragic story. Closure. I wanted to see how they would spin this, how they would dance. I picked up on the 5th call. Hello. My voice was cool, dry, effortlessly neutral. It was my father. His voice came through shaky but loud, like he was overcompensating for the shame I knew he'd never fully admit to. Sweetheart, he began, the word already feeling dishonest. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I let the silence stretch just long enough for him to feel it. Misunderstanding? I echoed softly, tilting my head slightly even though he couldn't see me. That's a fascinating word for it. He cleared his throat. We didn't know. Ethan never mentioned anything about working with your firm. If we had known. You would have what? I interrupted, not angry, not even hurt, just tired. Let me attend my own mother's birthday dinner? Allowed me to sit at the table with the rest of you? Or maybe you would have warned him first so he could hide it better. No, sweetheart, it's not like that, he said quickly. You have to understand, we never meant to exclude you. I smiled, but it was one of those smiles you feel behind your teeth more than on your lips. You've excluded me for years, I said calmly. This time, you just happened to put it in writing. Before he could respond, I heard a shuffle, the sound of the phone changing hands, and then my mother's voice, softer but more carefully composed, the tone she always used when she knew she had to clean up a mess. We're proud of you, she said, and the words hit me like a foreign language I couldn't quite translate. We didn't realize the scale of what you were doing. You've built something truly impressive. I let the words hang in the air like smoke. I didn't respond. I wanted her to hear the weight of her own belated praise. I wanted her to taste how hollow it sounded after all these years of silence and disapproval. You've always been so independent, she continued, her voice faltering just slightly. We assumed you didn't want to be involved in family things. No, I said, my voice cutting through her performance like a scalpel. You assumed I wouldn't make you proud in the ways that counted at cocktail parties. You assumed I'd always be your footnote. The line went quiet again. And then, like clockwork, Ava called. This time it wasn't a video call. Just audio. Just her voice, now stripped of the smug confidence, replaced by something breathless and stammering. Hey, she said, like we were friends catching up after an awkward party, not sisters confronting a lifetime of unequal love. Look, I'm sorry. I didn't know Ethan was working with your company. He never told me. If I had known, you would have let me come? I offered, finishing her sentence like it was a script I had memorized in another life. You would have saved me a seat? She went quiet. Then she laughed nervously, the sound brittle and shallow. Come on. You know how these family things get. Mom gets nervous. Dad's always trying to impress people. And Ethan, he was just nervous too, I think. I felt something ancient in me harden. Funny, I said. He didn't seem nervous when I interviewed him. Or when we negotiated his contract. Or when he signed the NDA and told my team he was thrilled to work under a visionary female leader. Those were his words, by the way. Ava exhaled sharply, like she'd been holding her breath this whole time. I didn't wait for her to scramble to gather a defense. I was done making space for their stories. You wanted to introduce me to someone really successful, I continued, mimicking her earlier tone with perfect precision. And as it turns out, that someone works for me. He answers to me. He's getting his paycheck, his client list, and his upcoming promotion, all because I gave his firm a chance. Wait, she said, something new in her voice, alarm, maybe. Are you pulling the contract? I paused, just long enough to let the question echo. I could, I said. I absolutely could. But I won't. Because unlike the rest of you, I understand how to separate personal feelings from professional obligations. This isn't about revenge. It never was. Relief rushed through the phone in the form of silence. But let me be very clear, I continued, my voice steady and crystalline. If his performance wavers, if I find out he's using this connection to elevate himself dishonestly, then yes, the contract will be terminated without hesitation. Of course, she said quickly, like she had just escaped something on fire. And one more thing, I added, letting the moment swell. This is business, I said. Not personal. Though, apparently, that's all I've ever been to you. And with that, I ended the call. The rest of the evening passed in silence. Not peaceful silence. Not sad silence. Just clean. There was something oddly satisfying about letting the facts speak louder than my pain. About knowing I didn't need to yell or cry or beg anyone to see me. I had already been seen, just not by them. I had built an empire of validation that existed outside the fragile architecture of family approval. And yet, as I moved around my apartment turning off lights, closing documents, and wiping the day from my face, I felt a dull ache at the edges of it all. Not regret. Not sorrow. Just a quiet mourning for the version of me that had once waited for their recognition like it was oxygen. The version who would have given anything to be loved by them the way they loved each other. That girl was gone now. She had died quietly in a room full of people who never knew her name. And I was still here. There's something hauntingly peaceful about the moment you realize you don't owe anyone an explanation. Not your silence, not your success, and certainly not your forgiveness. That kind of freedom doesn't roar in like a storm. It arrives quietly, like a new dawn, painting everything in the soft gold of perspective. And that's exactly what I felt in the days that followed, the strange and unfamiliar peace of having nothing left to prove. After I ended the call with Ava, my phone didn't stop buzzing for nearly 48 hours. Messages flooded in like a dam had broken, each one stitched with desperation disguised as concern. My father sent a flurry of texts trying to clarify what he called a big misunderstanding, while my mother leaned into her role as the ever-anxious hostess who'd simply tried to avoid drama at her own birthday dinner. As if my absence, not their exclusion, had disrupted the harmony of their curated little gathering. Ava sent voice memos at first, 3 of them in a row, each one more unhinged than the last. In one, she was apologetic, her voice cracking as she described how shocked she was to learn about my professional standing. In the next, she was defensive, claiming it was never meant to feel personal and that Mom was just under a lot of pressure that week. By the third, she was angry, her tone bitter and snide, laced with the kind of jealousy I'd tasted in her voice since we were kids. She accused me of embarrassing the family on purpose, of using my career to manipulate the situation, and even dared to suggest that I'd blindsided Ethan, as if his ignorance of my identity wasn't entirely his own fault. I didn't respond. Not because I hadn't thought of what to say. Believe me, I had entire monologues ready, crafted with precision and laced with truths that would burn clean through their self-justifications. But I didn't respond because I finally understood the most important truth of all. They weren't reaching out because they saw me. They were reaching out because now other people saw me and they were afraid of what that meant for them. They didn't want reconciliation. They wanted control, and I had taken it away. By the third day, I stopped checking my voicemail altogether. My assistant, Olivia, started filtering the calls that came to my direct line at work. She'd peek into my office now and then, eyebrows arched, asking, "Another one from your sister? Want me to forward it to spam?" I'd nod without looking up from my laptop, offering a half smile. She always returned the gesture with a wink, like we were part of some inside joke only the emotionally emancipated get to enjoy. Instead of wasting my energy on their frantic attempts at damage control, I poured it into something else entirely, my own life. My real life. The one I had built with grit, sleepless nights, fearless risk-taking, and the kind of honesty that could only grow in the absence of approval. That week, I took my team out for drinks after we locked in our biggest quarter to date. We clinked glasses over tapas and laughed until our stomachs ached, sharing stories about the early days, back when we were running operations from my apartment living room, eating ramen at our desks and working 14-hour days. I looked around that table, at those faces glowing with possibility, and I thought, this is my real family. People who showed up when things were hard. People who believed in me long before I had the glossy resume and the keynote invitations. People who never needed me to shrink to feel comfortable around me. And later that night, when I was finally back home, curled under a blanket with a glass of wine and the city lights glittering beyond my windows, I opened my inbox to find something unexpected. A message from the editorial team at Visionary Women Quarterly. Subject: Congratulations, you've been selected. I blinked. Then I clicked. Dear Ms. Redacted, It is our honor to inform you that you've been selected as the recipient of this year's Trailblazer Award for Creative Innovation and Leadership. Your work in redefining the boundaries of storytelling through technology, art, and advocacy has not only transformed industries, it has inspired a new generation of female creatives to pursue bold, uncompromising visions. We would be thrilled to feature your story in our upcoming issue and invite you to the awards gala in New York City next month. Please find the formal invitation attached. For a moment, I just sat there, rereading the words again and again, letting the truth of them sink in, not because I needed the validation, but because it was surreal to realize I no longer sought it. And then, slowly, deliberately, I picked up my phone. I opened the message thread from Ava, 6 unread texts, 2 voicemails, and 1 attempt at a shared family calendar invitation titled Reconnect Dinner, Sunday. My thumb hovered over it for a second, the screen pulsing gently beneath my skin. Then, with a flick and a soft, satisfying click, I deleted the entire thread. Next, I opened the one from my mother, then my father's. Then a handful of relatives I hadn't heard from in years, but who were suddenly very interested in my amazing career path. I deleted them all, one by one. No hesitation. No second guessing. Just peace. Because the truth was, I didn't need a table at their dinner. I didn't need a seat in their circle or a slot on their guest list. I had built something far greater than a place card in a room full of people who never really knew me. I had built an empire of my own, and the rooms I walked into now? I didn't wait to be welcomed. I was already the reason they existed. The following Friday, I walked into the executive's suite of our high-rise office, a fresh espresso in hand, Olivia trailing behind me with a stack of magazines and press kits. I slid into my chair, the one with the city skyline behind it, and flipped through a glossy new issue of Visionary Women, where my face graced the cover beside a quote that read, "She didn't wait to be invited, she built her own damn door." Olivia placed a gold-embossed envelope on my desk. "Your RSVP for the gala," she said with a smile. "Send it in," I said, not looking up. "And book a table for my team." "All of them?" she asked, already knowing the answer. "All of them," I replied. "Because no one gets left behind at my table. Not anymore. Not the quiet assistant who stayed late when no one noticed. Not the intern who spoke up with a brave idea and was told to wait her turn. Not the underdog, the overlooked, the underestimated. Those are the people I save seats for. Those are the people I lift." Later that afternoon, while reviewing a creative proposal with our art director, my phone buzzed again. New voicemail. Dad, 1 minute 47 seconds. I didn't listen to it. I didn't even flinch. I just deleted it. They banned me from the family table. But when the tables turned, they realized. I owned the whole room. Subscribe for more stories like this, because sometimes the quietest girls grow up to be the loudest truths.